Hi everyone! Today I'm summarizing First Lie Wins by Ashley Elston. This is a spoiler-filled summary based on my view, so I may miss some scenes. If you like it, the purchase link is in the description. Evie Porter is in a relationship with Ryan Sumner. They seem to be very attracted to each other, but the truth is, for Evie, Ryan is just another project. Evie studied Ryan for months because he is simply a job she needs to complete. She doesn't yet know what exactly she has to do to Ryan, she's just waiting for further instructions. However, she has already completed the first task, making Ryan fall for her. That's how her job works. She works for someone called Mr. Smith, and her work is project-based. She is assigned a project, given a false identity to assume, and expected to fully adapt to that role. Most of the time, she pretends to be someone else. Her assignments usually involve complicated and powerful people, which is why she gets paid a lot. The job also comes with significant risks. Aside from the materials she's provided for every assignment, she also conducts her own research. She was given a profile on Ryan first. Ryan is a businessman who inherited his grandfather's company. He is very wealthy and lost his wife a year ago. He was also a witness to his grandfather's death and inherited his grandfather's large house. Evie managed to make Ryan fall for her. At first, she simply observed his routine and schedule. She also stalked his previous relationships to understand what type of woman Ryan is attracted to. To get to know him, Evie pretended to have a flat tire and positioned herself along a route Ryan usually passed. When he saw her and approached, she asked for help. That's when they started talking. Evie mentioned a mutual connection, and after that, they had dinner, and that's where it all began. Evie and Ryan started dating. Ryan introduced Evie to his friends, who were very curious about her and even interrogated her. But Evie had been doing this for years and knew exactly how to handle it. She had studied Ryan thoroughly and was well prepared to deal with his friends. However, one friend stood out as a challenge: Rachel, the only single one in the group. Rachel seemed suspicious of Evie, though Evie didn't know why. Maybe Rachel was just protective of Ryan. Still, Evie managed to answer her questions and even reached out to Rachel personally to avoid any awkwardness. Evie wanted to win over Ryan's friends. One time, Evie and Ryan attended an event. They dressed up, and Ryan reconnected with a longtime friend, James, or Jamie. Ryan and Jamie talked, and Ryan introduced Evie to him. But Jamie had brought someone with him, a woman who shocked Evie because she resembled her almost exactly. She looked like Evie's twin. Even more surprising, the woman introduced herself as Luca Marina. Evie had to compose herself. Luca Marina is Evie's real name. Evie concluded that whoever this woman really is, she was pretending to be Luca Marina and had been sent by Mr. Smith to warn her. Evie is not in good standing with Mr. Smith because she failed a previous job. Mr. Smith may be testing her or looking into her to assess her loyalty. Evie was curious about why Mr. Smith sent someone pretending to be Luca Marina and wanted to know her role in this assignment. When she had the chance, she invited Luca Marina and Jamie into the house. At this point, Evie had already moved in with Ryan, at his insistence. To keep up appearances, she pretended to dispose of her belongings when, in reality, she had collected most of them from Goodwill to make her identity more believable. While Evie and Ryan were shopping, they ran into Luca and Jamie at a hardware store. They exchanged small talk, and Evie saw an opportunity. She invited them to dinner. During dinner, they chatted casually while Evie subtly tried to gather information from Luca. She also planted false information in the house, knowing Luca would likely snoop around. She was right. Luca went to the bathroom and snooped. While Ryan and Jamie were talking, Evie confronted Luca. She told her she had planted information in the house and already sent it to Mr. Smith. It was a setup. Evie wanted to confirm if Luca really worked for Mr. Smith and warn her not to interfere. She also wanted to find out how much Luca knew or if she had further instructions. Luca initially pretended not to know what Evie was talking about, but Evie pressed, and eventually, Luca admitted the truth. Evie warned her, and Luca seemed shaken she had been caught. After the conversation, they returned to join Ryan and Jamie, who were also in a bad mood. Jamie had drunk quite a bit, so they all walked to the garage, with Luca driving since Jamie was too drunk. Evie and Ryan walked back to the house. Later, Ryan revealed that Jamie had asked him for money. Ryan was annoyed because Jamie had done this before, and he decided not to lend him anything. The next day, they woke up to the news that Jamie and Luca had died in a car crash. Their car had plunged into the water, and their bodies had to be recovered. It was confirmed that it was them. Ryan was devastated. He felt guilty because of their conversation the night before, and because Jamie was a childhood friend. The crash happened shortly after they had left Ryan's house. Ryan immediately decided to visit Jamie's family to console them. Meanwhile, Evie was rattled. She feared Mr. Smith had caused the accident, possibly because Luca had been exposed and was no longer useful. Evie was also alarmed because this meant Luca Marina's identity might now be exposed. She had taken great care of that identity. When Evie stops working for Mr. Smith, she had hoped to reclaim her real identity, Luca Marina, and live a peaceful life. But now that Luca Marina is dead, there is no identity for her to return to. Evie and Ryan visited Jamie's family. The police were there, and once they learned Evie and Ryan had dinner with the couple before their deaths, they were interviewed. This was bad for Evie because she had to give them her details tied to her false identity, Evie Porter. The police asked basic questions. Evie told the truth. Jamie was drunk, and Luca had only 2 glasses of wine and wasn't really intoxicated. What scared Evie the most was that she had provided a name and address that could compromise her, especially because she had been involved in another crime tied to her previous work. Evie has someone working for her. His name is Davin. Mr. Smith doesn't know about Davin. Evie hired Davin herself so she would have someone to back her up in case something goes wrong and Mr. Smith decides not to pull her out of the job. Over the years, Evie and Davin have built trust, and they follow very secure communication protocols to avoid being detected by Mr. Smith or any of the people he assigns to watch her. Sometimes, during her assignments, Evie is shadowed. Someone is assigned to observe and record her actions. That's why Evie has to be very careful, especially if she does something Mr. Smith shouldn't find out about. A few days after Evie provided her information to the police, as a witness in the death of Luca Marina, she received a text from Davin. It was their coded warning. She needed to vault out. But at that moment, Ryan was kissing her, so she wasn't able to leave the house right away. She was already in her car when they heard the sirens, too late to escape. Even as she sat in the car, someone was already knocking on the window to get her out. Ryan appeared worried, thinking the police were there for him. Evie knew this could be possible after all. She was assigned to investigate Ryan's business. He was involved in the black market and obtained his supplies illegally. Ryan was afraid something had gone wrong and alerted the authorities. However, the police confronted Evie and asked her to come to the station. Evie stayed calm and went with them. At the station, when the questions began, she requested a lawyer. That lawyer was Rachel, the same Rachel who had been skeptical of her when they first met, and the only single person in Ryan's group of friends. Rachel arrived and helped her. She had done some digging into Evie's background and found a few things, though not the whole truth. Evie wasn't ready to tell her everything. She simply instructed Rachel on what to do next, how to deal with the authorities, and look for ways to protect her. Evie wanted to find out what information the police had on her. Rachel worked on that and managed to get Evie released, as long as she agreed to attend follow-up questioning with detectives in Atlanta. Evie and Rachel agreed. Ryan was worried, but didn't press her for details. He knew Evie wasn't ready to talk and was willing to wait until she was. Evie appreciated not having to lie to him. Now that she had time, Evie started working on a plan with Davin. She reached out to Mr. Smith and received new instructions. It was a test. Her last job had been with a woman named Amy, who died in a fire. That incident compromised Evie because the fire happened in Atlanta, and the police suspected Evie had something to do with it. They had photos of Evie and Amy arguing in a parking lot. Unbeknownst to Evie at the time, Mr. Smith was the one sending those photos to the police to shake her up. With the identity of Luca Marina no longer usable, Evie only had the Evie Porter identity left. Mr. Smith believed Evie had taken something the night Amy died. Evie had called him during the fire and claimed she couldn't retrieve anything, that she had to save herself. but Mr. Smith didn't believe her. After his own investigation, Mr. Smith found out that Evie went to a storage vault in Atlanta. He suspected she had hidden what she took from Amy there. Mr. Smith then instructed Evie to go to the safety deposit box and surrender the contents to him. Once she did that, he said, the police case would disappear because it was he who had fabricated it in the first place. He warned her that he would be sending more evidence to the detectives, and it would truly compromise her. Evie, however, insisted the contents of the storage box had nothing to do with Amy's death. Mr. Smith wouldn't listen. After reading his instructions, Evie began to understand what Mr. Smith was really up to. She saw a chance to improve her plan, but she also knew it was risky. She was up against both the police and Mr. Smith. Later, she cried in the shower. Ryan saw her and comforted her. With Davin's help, Evie finalized her plan. She told Rachel she needed time before meeting with the detectives. Rachel insisted on going with her, since she was legally responsible for Evie's whereabouts. But Evie pushed back. She needed to fix some things and promised she would show up. Rachel wasn't happy but agreed. Ryan, on the other hand, was more difficult. Evie didn't want to tell him too much, but she also didn't want to push him away. Ryan insisted on coming with her. He said he might be useful to her, and Evie eventually agreed. They would go to Atlanta together. As part of her plan, Evie had several stopovers. These were also meant to trigger Mr. Smith and reveal his next move. Before her meeting with the detectives, she was with Ryan and starting to trust him. While staying at a motel, Evie went looking for headache medicine. She then heard someone talking. It was George. George was usually one of the drivers Mr. Smith assigned to Evie. Every time she had an assignment, George would show up to deliver mail, supplies, or check in. He changed his appearance often, but they had developed a friendly rapport. He once told Evie, "If it feels like a test, it's a test." Advice she found valuable. That night, Evie heard George talking to someone. She assumed Ryan had already gone ahead to the restaurant, so she texted him. But then she heard the text alert on George's phone. It was Ryan's number. Evie was shocked George was talking to Ryan. She didn't catch much of the conversation, only that Ryan said something must have spooked her and he had to come back. Evie realized George and Ryan knew each other, and she began to wonder, what if Ryan is Mr. Smith? It made sense. Ryan had given her address to the police, and it was Ryan who had delayed their exit the night the police arrived by stopping to kiss her. Evie relayed this suspicion to Davin, who began investigating. Meanwhile, Evie knew she had to be careful around Ryan. That night, after Ryan went to sleep, Evie left to take care of things on her own. Davin continued working in the background, trying to uncover Mr. Smith's true identity. Eventually, Davin discovered that Mr. Smith was actually George, not Ryan. Evie was surprised. Ryan might still be involved, but now it was clear George was the one behind everything. The next day, Evie met with the detectives. They asked how she knew Amy. Evie answered simply and calmly. When they showed her the photo evidence, Evie was already prepared thanks to Davin's earlier hacks. She told the detectives the woman in the photo was Luca Marina. The detectives pulled up Luca's file and, noticing the resemblance, began to hesitate. Davin had already created records for Luca Marina to support Evie's claim. At the time of the photo, Evie had been operating under a different alias for a different assignment. When asked, she told the detectives she had been in a toxic relationship and was hiding from her ex. She even provided a restraining order fabricated and added by Davin. When they asked where she was the night Amy died, she said she had dinner with a friend, Tyrone. That wasn't entirely true. She did have dinner with him, just not that same night. Still, it served as an alibi. Tyrone was a famous football player, and when the detectives heard the name, they were impressed. Evie offered to contact Tyrone, knowing he wouldn't appreciate her giving out his number. They FaceTimed him, and the detectives were starstruck. Tyrone answered their questions convincingly, thanks to Davin feeding him details in real time. The detectives seemed satisfied, and Evie was confident she was now in the clear. Tyrone was someone Evie had met during a previous job where she was hired to get a school committee to fire a coach. That job was tied to the football industry and its big money ties. After completing the job, she visited Tyronathan Young and Naive and gave him advice on how to navigate the business wisely. That advice helped him build a strong career. They stayed in touch, and Tyrone repaid her favor by helping now. This was what Evie had been doing for years, building connections with powerful people. In another job, she was assigned to find dirt on a squeaky clean governor named Andrew. She couldn't find anything on him, so she diverted and got dirt on his political rivals instead. Though it wasn't her original assignment, it proved useful to Mr. Smith, and he didn't penalize her for the deviation. Evie even warned Andrew not to be too trusting. He appreciated it, and in return, offered to help her in the future if she ever left her line of work. After the meeting with the detectives, Evie met with George. George didn't know yet that Evie had discovered he was Mr. Smith. He was pretending he had been sent by Mr. Smith to accompany her in surrendering the contents of the storage box. Meanwhile, Davin was on the lookout. At the storage unit, Evie and George, also known as Mr. Smith, opened the safety deposit box. To their surprise, the only thing inside was a single folded paper crane, an origami swan. There were no documents, no money, no sensitive files, just the swan. But the swan held more value than anything else. Inside it was a note, Evie's own record of everything she had learned about Mr. Smith. The truth was this: Amy wasn't dead. She was still alive and working in the background alongside Davin. The fire at the hotel had been a setup. Amy and Evie had staged the entire scene to make Mr. Smith believe Amy had died. That night, Evie had followed Amy to the hotel, disguised as a hotel employee. She entered Amy's room claiming there was a fire, but the truth was, there actually was a fire, caused by Amy falling asleep while smoking. However, they used that moment to their advantage. Instead of trying to save anything, Evie let the fire burn. It created the perfect cover story. Mr. Smith believed Amy had perished. In reality, Amy had gone into hiding and continued working undercover to help take him down. Davin joined them, while Evie continued playing her role inside Mr. Smith's operation. Now, standing at the storage unit, George turned to her and asked, "How long have you known?" Evie answered, "Just recently." Then he asked, "How long have you been planning to take me down?" Evie looked him in the eye and said, "For the last 4 years." Evie, Amy, and Davin had been working to uncover Mr. Smith's real identity, collect blackmail material, and expose his betrayal to his most powerful client, a man who had paid Mr. Smith a fortune, only to be double-crossed. Instead of confronting Mr. Smith directly, Evie's plan was simple: leak the truth to the client. Let the client take care of Mr. Smith himself. That made Evie untouchable. Her 4-year plan began during one of Mr. Smith's earlier assignments, when she and Amy were sent to retrieve a valuable painting. While Evie completed the job, Davin ran surveillance. They later discovered that nearly all the people involved in that mission had mysteriously disappeared or died except for Evie and Amy. That was the red flag. Evie reached out to Amy, warning her. They were next once they outlived their usefulness. Amy was hesitant but eventually agreed to work with Evie. She had someone she needed to protect their sister Heather, and they knew Mr. Smith would use Heather against her if given the chance. So they took their time, moved carefully, and made sure they knew Mr. Smith's true identity before making any moves. When the time was right, they staged Amy's death and set their plan in motion. Now, their employment under Mr. Smith was over. Evie no longer had any obligation to Ryan either. She wasn't even sure how involved Ryan was, if he was working for Mr. Smith or just a pawn in a larger game. After a while, they let things settle. Evie and Amy went back to their lives, no longer under Mr. Smith's control. But something still nagged at Evie Ryan. She couldn't stop thinking about him, how he had taken care of her, how he comforted her that night instead of confronting her. She visited Ryan's house, the one she once lived in, and found him in the garden he'd promised to build for her because she loved plants. They talked. Ryan had actually come clean to Evie before the detective meeting. He told her that his business wasn't entirely legal, as shipments were sourced from gray market suppliers. That's what he did every Thursday, the secret Evie had been assigned to uncover. But he told her voluntarily, hoping she'd trust him. Now that she knew Ryan wasn't working for Mr. Smith, Evie opened up about everything. She told him George was Mr. Smith. Ryan was surprised he knew George only as someone who helped with shipments. George had warned Ryan that someone was sabotaging his operations and told him it was Evie. But when Ryan reviewed the files George provided, he saw errors, inconsistencies, things that didn't make sense. Now everything was clear. Ryan confessed that at one point, he did suspect Evie of betrayal because of George's tip. But when he found her crying helplessly in the bathroom, he couldn't confront her. Instead, he chose to comfort her. With their secrets now laid bare, Evie moved back into Ryan's house. Ryan continued his work. He no longer dressed sharply on Thursdays because Evie knew where he went. And Evie no longer worked for Mr. Smith. That day, after Ryan left for work, Evie walked into her home office, one that Ryan had set up just for her. She turned on her computer. On the screen were Davin and Amy, both waiting on the call. It was time for a new chapter. Now that Mr. Smith was taken down, it was their time. They had messages to review. Potential clients. They smiled at Evie and called her Mrs. Smith. The meaning was unclear, perhaps symbolic, or perhaps literal, suggesting they were taking over the same kind of operation Mr. Smith once ran. But either way, they were now the ones in control. The true identity of Evie Porter. Evie Porter's real name is Luca Marina. She grew up with her mother in a small town. They were poor, and her mother had cancer. Evie had to take over the finances at a young age. Her survival meant one thing: theft. She started small stealing at parties by pretending to be someone from a rich family. Over time, she moved up. She applied to work as a hostess at an exclusive club and stole credit card information. She brought her own scanner and laptop to copy data while processing payments. She got away with it for a while. Eventually, she was caught. Her setup was confiscated. She was handcuffed and escorted out. But as she was being placed into a police car, a man with authority stepped in. He told the arresting officer he would handle her. He let her go and handed her a card with contact details. Later, when she called the number, she was instructed where to pick up her laptop, and she was given a job offer. That contact was a recruiter working for Mr. Smith. Turns out, they'd been watching Luca for a while and they were impressed. That's how she became Evie Porter. And that's the end of Evie Porter's story twists, secrets, and a powerful finish. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, the link to purchase is in my bio. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my other story summaries.